How's it going, guys? It's the Pretty Boy Offense. My name's Saj, and we're going to do a breakdown of all the games from Week 4 of the NFL, how I feel about all these teams moving forward with regards to survivor picks. A lot of interesting things happened this weekend. This was kind of like the big one, Week 4, where we get to see if these like trends that teams were on are legitimate. Are they actually following like their certain trajectories? I think 3 games is a good sample size, but 4 games really like kind of cements how we feel about these teams. Certain teams like the Eagles and the Vikings had some question marks because they're not really getting the wins, but they're competing, they're getting the points on the board. So this was actually like the breaking point, I think, where we can actually determine where some of these like middle tier teams, if we're picking against them, if we're going to be saving them and using them. And then also with some of the top tier teams that we were saving, like the Chiefs and the Bucks, had some underperforming weeks. How do we feel about them moving forward? I'm going to break down all that in this. So without any further ado, just have all my notes here. I've watched all the games and stuff. And I think, let's start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New England Patriots. It's a really important game, not only in just the landscape of the NFL, but also just like historically, like Tom Brady like passed the all-time passing record and stuff with that. So congratulations to him. But with regards to these two teams and how we feel about them moving forward in Survivor, there wasn't too much to take away from this game. Superficially, we kind of see that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers weren't as high flying as they should have been. Tom Brady was off a little bit with his throws. People are going to associate that with like his coming back to New England, being emotional. Maybe Bill Belichick had his number. And I think Belichick was playing a really good defense the whole game. You can see Davis Mills was staying on top of Chris Godwin, like over the top, not necessarily on top, but over the top. So he was never open for those big shots. And Brady was a little bit off on his throws to like Cameron Brate. There were a bunch of drops too by his receivers as well, but nothing to panic about. I think the one thing that is not being talked about enough is the weather of this game. There was a lot of rain, and that affects the ball. It affects the offense. Bruce Arians is not scared of weather. He'll throw in the weather, but it does affect the quarterbacks. It affects the wide receivers. And then if we didn't have those drops, like this game could have looked completely different. It just turned into a kicking game. The Bucks got out of there with a win. So anybody who took the Bucks this week, you're happy. I don't think a lot of people were taking the Patriots, thankfully. But so I think that the Bucks are the same team. The concerning thing is Richard Sherman having to play cornerback for them. He was just signed this week, and you don't ever want to take like fresh meat, put it on the field, because he just got targeted and he never got burned, but he was called for a few penalties, and that's going to be something that we have to monitor moving forward. Just the health of the Bucks secondary. They're not that deep, so even when they are fully healthy, like any like in-game injury could hurt them. It's just something we have to be aware of. But I think Tampa's still like one of the best teams in the league, and we'll be picking them appropriately. With the New England Patriots, however, the defense played good. They're still without Stephon Gilmore, so once Gilmore comes back, that's even better, so that they immediately get a knock up that way. But one thing I want to mention with the Patriots was Mac Jones is playing really well, which is awesome to see. But him playing super well isn't translating to a lot of points in all the games that they've played. So as promising as it is to see Mac Jones just be a good, serviceable quarterback, at some point we need the Jonnu Smith targets, the Hunter Henry targets. They spent a lot of money on those two guys. We need them to start turning into touchdowns. And until we start seeing these points kind of get, racked up each game, I don't know how safe the Patriots are moving forward in Survivor. I don't ever want to pick them in a week thinking this will be the week that it clicks, but it doesn't, and then maybe they lose. So the Patriots kind of creeping back towards the middle pack, where I originally had high hopes for them. And you know what? They're also affected by the running back injuries. James White's out, so they need to figure out that as well. They're predominantly going to be a running team just because it's safer. It's more manageable that way. But until those tight ends really become a lethal part of their scoring offense, that's going to be one thing, a team that we want to stay away from. Don't bet against them. Don't bet with them. Just kind of let them settle down a bit, I think. Okay, so another really big game on the weekend was the Chiefs versus Eagles. This wasn't so much a big game, like this was in terms of like the landscape of the NFL, but what it means in Survivor, because the Eagles were a team that I think we all kind of agree is like one of the worst teams in the league. But they have Jalen Hurts at quarterback, and criticisms I have of Jalen Hurts as a quarterback and a professional NFL quarterback, beside the point, like he does add a dynamic to that offense and keeps them in games when they shouldn't and scores points, right? The opposite of Mac Jones. He's not as good as a quarterback of Mac Jones, but he keeps, scoring points for that team. So moving forward with the Eagles, their defense is bad. Fletcher Cox isn't playing that great. Their cornerbacks aren't doing good either. When you're not getting pressure on the other team, you're going to get diced up. And then if you're going to get diced up, you need to be able to score to keep up with the teams that are scoring on you. And they just don't have that consistency in their offense. So I would never bet the Eagles to win any games. But on the other side of the ball, the Chiefs, this was concerning because I kind of wanted this to be like a get right game for them, a game where we get more confidence in the Chiefs because they were doing what they've done all like last year and the year before, where it was Mahomes just doing magical plays and he would just almost always click with them. The defense played well enough. And now we're in a year where the defense isn't as good as it was, or isn't performing as well as it was. And some of those throws that Mahomes was making to like Hill and Kelsey aren't landing. So we're finding out that when your quarterback isn't playing at this super high tier, that this team creeps back to being like a more of a gamble with Survivor. Whereas we used to, when those throws are always landing, they're winning those games. But once a couple of those get dropped, now they're more of a liability. And like they're in these games like up until the fourth quarter and they haven't even pulled away yet. They did win, thankfully, but we've seen against like better opposition, like the Chargers, the Browns, the Ravens, like those games get close. So I'm still confident in the Chiefs, but I would never just pencil them in to beat like these better teams now. We'll have to be selective of any future games that we use the Chiefs in. Hopefully, we'll get more opportunities where they're playing weak teams like an Eagles team or something, and that's when we'll use them. But this type of team that we can bank on just to keep right to the end, I don't know if they're going to be that yet. So we'll keep that in mind as we move forward. Mostly, and then like the running game was starting to get figured out. That is one thing I'll say. Like Clyde played much better this game and was getting opportunities to be productive, which is always a good thing to see. So that was a one positive from the Chiefs. So then moving on from that game, Seahawks versus 49ers, NFC West showdown. The injuries were dominating the headlines of this game. If their kicker isn't injured, maybe this game plays out a little differently in terms of missed kicks, going for it, and what their game plan is. They probably got a little more conservative and a little more concerned about what was capable with that offense. And then you saw that in the second half, that the Jimmy injury and the kicker injury kind of caught up to them. Defense did what it did. Their cornerbacks are still injured. They still need to get healthy, get right. But their defensive line is still like so disruptive. And you saw them get to Russ. Russ only figured it out until the second half. And so I think I'm just going to make a point here about Trey Lance, where I kind of talked about in another video where if Trey Lance was playing for the 49ers had to understand that they're not guaranteed a playoff spot. No team is ever guaranteed that, but you'd think with the roster that the 49ers had, even if Garoppolo's ceiling isn't that of what Trey Lance could be, like, RG3 when Shanahan was working with him for his rookie year, he would manage the game well enough that you were in the contest. He wasn't making big time throws on the field, but he was going to be, making sure that your team stays in it, always giving you a chance, managing that offense appropriately, doing that system. Trey Lance was always going to be a project, and I think the 49ers, like faithful and people who wanted to use the 49ers later in the season for Survivor, now have to adjust what they think the 49ers are capable of. Because with a quarterback that is so raw, and we saw in this game is off on some throws and almost overthrew a wide open receiver for that big touchdown. He almost overthrew him. It was clear. But you got to know there's going to be growing pains, and he's going to make some of these games harder on that team. So we'll have to find the games. Luckily, the 49ers have a relatively easy schedule. Being the fourth place team in the NFC West, they got the fourth place schedule. So there'll be opportunities to take the 49ers, but be very careful when you take them. Like, they're not a slam dunk anymore. So that kind of sucks for anyone. I luckily took the 49ers earlier this season. There was really no big reason. I just got lucky. I thought there was an opportunity to take them. I think on the other side of the ball, the Seahawks, the defense is still really bad. Their secondary is just so like bad. I want to find another way of putting it, but when you're not stopping anyone. Jamal Adams is still kind of positionless and not super influential on any side of the defense in terms of like rushing the passer or dropping into coverage. And he's super talented. I just think the system's kind of failing him. And then you have Russell Wilson on the other side, and he's kind of suffering from the Pat Mahomes stuff too, where it's just, yes, we know that when you make these big throws, your offense is good and you're winning games, but it's such a high risk play and something to bank on, especially in Survivor, where we need you to just win that 1 week. Where if you don't hit those throws, is that going to be the reason you win or lose that game? That's such a hard reason to want to pick you in Survivor. So again, I think Seattle is, as confident as I am with them in terms of like just being a professional football team, making a run at playoffs and stuff like that. It's going to be hard to really have anything concrete to like wrap my head around and like understand, be like, yes, this is a good week to take the Seahawks, because if a team gets to Russ and he's just missing throws, and if his timing's off with Lockett, or if he just misses one throw to DK Metcalf, that could cost them their week, right? And then on the back of that, we'll start talking about this quarterback in Kyler Murray for the Cardinals, who in a similar fashion to Russ is capable of making all those throws, but his completion percentage has been north of like 80% in 2 games, was 75% last game. He's had an unreal completion percentage, scoring all these touchdowns. When you have Hopkins, Green, who's leading that team in targets, Rondale Moore, who's so dynamic, Christian Kirk, who's had like 100-yard games as well. There's just so much more consistency in that offense, where that's what I would love to see out of like Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks before I start betting on them. And then in this game, the Cardinals versus Rams, since we're talking about the NFC West, yeah, super confident in the Cardinals now. They have a tough game coming up next week with the 49ers. And I only say it's tough because the pass rush for the 49ers is very good. And if we get a game plan for Trey Lance running, then that could just be one of those hiccup games where it's just like, okay, well, how do we stop this guy who we've never seen before, who just wants to run all over the field? It could just be the game that gets the Cardinals bad situation, right? So, but the Cardinals do have a lot of future value. They'll be playing the Texans in a few weeks. If you can hold out for when they play the Texans, I think that's a perfect matchup to play them. But yeah, their next 2 games are the, what did I just say? The 49ers and then the Browns. So I'd stay away from picking them in those 2 games, but the Houston game would be a great one to take them. And then on the other side of it, the Rams, I just think there's a situation, like I said, they just got like they dropped a lot into coverage. They were all over like Hopkins and stuff, which is usually a good game plan to take away the best receiver. But Cliff Kingsbury came with a plan being like, okay, you're gonna, even if you put 5 in the box, we're gonna commit to the run, and they committed to the run and it worked. I think the Rams still had a bit of a hangover from Tampa Bay. I think they thought this game was going to be a little bit easier, and that's just me projecting. I can't imagine that Sean McVay comes out with this game plan and thinks it's okay. I think Matthew Stafford had a bit of a coming back to like earth moment where, yes, it was like the honeymoon with Sean McVay was great those first 3 games, but we've seen Stafford in Detroit. It wasn't the game plan's fault. Some days he was just off. Some games he was just off, and he'd go through spurts of that, and he just had that here. He was close with Cooper Kupp, but he missed him a couple times with his tight ends and stuff. It was off just enough, whether it's the receivers, whether it's Matthew Stafford, whether it was the Cardinals defense doing it. It was just an off game, and I don't think it's anything too serious. If you guys have the Rams still available to you in your Survivor pools, then feel free to take them in future. I think they're still one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL, them and the Bucs. But yeah, it's just a hiccup of a game. Don't be taking them against you know what, maybe Thursday against the Seahawks I'd be comfortable with, but then when you get to those division games where rivalries like that, it's a little bit of a different breed. So I mean, I probably maybe don't take them against the Seahawks. Sorry, I'm like going back and forth on that. But yeah, the Rams still top team. You know, we'll be saving them for when we can use them in a really nice juicy matchup. Okay, now moving on from that, Steelers Packers. Kind of talked about this one. This was in the category of like, it's a good team versus a bad team. And for the Packers, there's not much to take away. The Packers did what they had to do. They didn't really target Devontae Adams as much as I would have liked to have seen. But Randall Cobb getting the end zone a couple times is great. Aaron Rodgers spreading the ball around is going to be awesome for when they go against those top teams that have great corners that try and cancel out Devontae Adams. Knowing that he's comfortable with Randall Cobb for a second time in his career, is always good. Marquez, Valdez Scantling, he's always been okay, but he's had a bit of the yips and dropped some stuff. So it's good knowing that Randall Cobb's there and just someone that he trusts. Where else do we want? Oh, the Jair Alexander injury. That's concerning, but I'll wait till we hear more about how serious that is. I love Jair Alexander. I think he's an incredible cornerback, one of the best in the league. So it would suck if he goes out because that definitely does hurt the Packers' value. He's such a pivotal part of that defense that they need him. So hopefully it's not anything serious for anybody who wants to use the Packers moving forward. But to take away anything from that game, it's the Packers are the Packers. Very good team. That week 1 game was such a hiccup with the Saints. Don't let that affect how you value the Packers moving forward. But the Steelers, on the other hand, are a bad team with a bad quarterback and a decent defense and a good defense when Watt is fully healthy, but he is not clearly, and he's pushing through things. And Roethlisberger's an absolute liability at the quarterback position. There was this one play where, outside of the Deontay Johnson touchdown, which had such nice touch on it, but I don't even know if that was intentional, honestly. But every throw, Roethlisberger's arm looked cooked. It was just floating. It's just it's the same as Drew Brees when we saw him playing last year. It's the same as what we saw a bit with Carson Palmer's arm when he was finishing up in Arizona. It's the same we saw with we already said Drew Brees. Peyton Manning's arm. He's getting older. His arm is just fully dead. If they want any chance of winning, they need to get rid of Roethlisberger on that roster. And you cannot be confident at all taking the Steelers in any game moving forward. This is a team now that we have to start moving into the category of, okay, these are the games I like this week. Who's playing the Steelers? Oh, it's this team. That's also a really good option because the Steelers are so bad. We'll just keep picking against the Steelers because I feel like we could ride out for a long time in the season just doing that. Which sucks because this is a cornerstone of the NFL, and I think the NFL is better when the Steelers are good. But yeah, if you're going to be bad, we're going to pick against you. All right, moving on from that game, Ravens-Broncos. This was another really good game that I wanted to talk about because the Broncos were 3-0, but the opposition that they placed were just so bad. So it's okay, what were they? What are you guys really? Are you guys contenders, pretenders? You're going against the Ravens, who are an incredible team, but injured. This would be a great measuring stick. Even if you lose, where do you match up to the Ravens? And people say, well, it's all about the matchups. Maybe the Ravens just had a good matchup on them. Yeah, but coaching's part of it too. So it's your job as a coach to then get your team ready to play against this. And they weren't ready. They just showed that Teddy wasn't too productive, got injured too, got the concussion, was out. So I hope he's all right, but he's not the answer. Neither is Drew Lock. They need Jerry Jeudy to come back. I think they need another something there just to help these quarterbacks, whoever's playing for them. But I was mentioning this before, the Broncos have a really tough stretch with the Ravens and then the next 2 games that if there does become a QB controversy, I'm completely out on the Broncos and I don't want to touch them. They're in a really tough division as well, so a lot of those games in the AFC West are going to be so competitive already. And then if you couple that with them management panicking, trying to figure out what the issue is. And sometimes the issue is just neither guy is good enough, right? You should have made the trade for Aaron Rodgers. You should have done something at quarterback, right? Maybe instead of going for your cornerback in the draft, you should have taken the Justin Fields or whatever. But yeah, it's a shame because this is an incredible roster. But I think as long as they're playing real competition, I don't think we can ever comfortably take the Broncos right now. Yeah, and it sucks because it's always better to have more teams that you're comfortable with, but it's just looking like this is a team that we want to stay away from betting against in Survivor, and we want to stay away from ever picking them in Survivor at this point now. And then, okay, so the other team in this game is the Ravens, where they did one thing this week where Murray just seemed to be their full-time running back, which is awesome, everything you want to see. In a confident team, because I think when you have a committee running back situation, productively it could work, but with the Ravens, they're such a run heavy team that I think it's important for them to have a focal point to know what they're going to get game in, game out, and plan with that for the season, as opposed to like having Williams, having Murray, having Bell, and trying to like figure out what's working. The fact that they announced Murray as a starter is just a vote of confidence into Murray, and then if they're confident in him, we should be confident in them, because John Harbaugh and his staff has worked wonders with so many players. So that's great. If anyone still the Ravens and wants to pick them moving forward, that's a great like bright spot for them. Anything else to take away from the Ravens, though? Lamar Jackson's doing Lamar Jackson things. He'll always kind of be that type of a player. Luckily, Hollywood pulled that in, so if Hollywood gets over those kind of yips, like luckily the game that should have got them against the Lions, they pulled off that huge kick, so it didn't really affect them too much. But yeah, the Ravens, they're the Ravens. We're confident taking them. They'll be good against good teams. They'll be good against bad teams. That's awesome. But the Broncos, like I said, let's stay away from those guys. All right, so moving on to some more games. Okay, so yeah, these are going to be the games where they kind of played out the way we expected, or at least I called them, whether it was against the grain or not. But Titans versus Jets, this was one of the games I said stay away from, because this team is so, like, just to go on a bit of a rant, just like rudderless. They had no direction. Getting rid of they didn't get rid of their offensive coordinator. Arthur Smith going to the Falcons, who I'll talk about that game in a second, was such a big concern for this offense, because it was so productive, and it was productive because of their game plan and the execution, and him getting the best out of Ryan Tannehill and all those weapons. But the solution that the Titans had was to just bring in Julio Jones, and that didn't fix this offense at all. This O-line slowly getting weaker. They lost Conklin and stuff to the Browns a couple of years ago, and Taylor Lewan was injured coming back and stuff. And we're just seeing all these little things kind of add up. Your two wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, who are great talents, are injured and have a history of being injured and like missing time. So now you have Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry to run this offense. And Derrick Henry's great, but it's great for the first half. And then the second half, when you're staring down the score of it only being like, when you're down 17-10, and you're only confident running Derrick Henry because like nobody else is there and nobody can like draw plays, like that's not okay, because you're going to be running it and you're losing time, and the situation's going to get worse and worse and worse. And that's basically what happened here. They just didn't have the guns to keep up with a Jets offense that only sporadically was relevant in this game, and it still was too much for the Titans to overcome. So the Titans, man, we can't touch the Titans at all. Maybe a fully healthy Titans, yeah, like in certain, like they play in the AFC South, so like a fully healthy Titans with AJ Brown, with Julio Jones, with Taylor Lewan, going against like a Jaguars or maybe a Houston, like we could. But I feel like we could probably find a better game those weeks. But I'm starting to lose faith in ever being comfortable taking the Titans in Survivor. Just the way they're going, the tendencies. When all of your success was like predicated on the run pass option and being the team that ran it the most the last few years, and then you lose your offensive coordinator, and your idea of still staying relevant is by not even running a single RPO or like running the lowest percentage of them. Like you got to show me that whatever you're going to concoct is going to work before I ever believe in taking you in Survivor. And they haven't. And the Jets just, I don't like it. This is so weird to say, but they're a bit more exciting and explosive than the Titans. Like the Jets were more explosive than the Titans in this game. That like no one's ever said that about the Jets this season. Zach Wilson threw it, and he threw it wildly, but he actually threw it to his own players this time, which was great. And they won, and that's great for Survivor, because we said to stay away from it, and hopefully you guys stayed away from it. And then other people blindly just picked the team against the Jets, and they got burned for it. But yeah, so the Jets are going to remain a team that we just, like Pittsburgh, we're going to keep an eye on them. Pittsburgh and the Eagles, just when teams are playing against them, we'll be like, okay, we'll bump that up on our list of our comfort level and stuff, because we know those three teams are bad. Okay, so the next game we want to talk about is Colts and Dolphins. There's not much to really take away from this game. Colts did what they were supposed to do. They're the quote-unquote healthier team with Carson Wentz. I don't think if you're ever going to be considered the healthier team, but they were the healthier team. They, credit where credit's due. They did beat up, or they did play and score points on a very good Dolphins defense, so good for them. They did what they had to do, but this was all about Brissett is just not good enough to be a quarterback right now for the Miami Dolphins. It's affecting their wins. It's affecting their play calling. I mean, all those receivers are built for speed, and Jacoby Brissett is just not capable of getting the ball to them at a playable level that is effective in an NFL game. Like once or twice, maybe it's good, but for the length of a game, he can't keep them in. He can't keep them relevant. So yeah, there's not much to say about the Colts. Hopefully, Quentin Nelson gets healthy and helps improve that team. They got a stacked roster. They just need to figure it out. And it hasn't really gotten to the point that we want. They ran more this game, which was awesome. So good to see for the Colts, because if it gets smarter like that, they could become a team that we bet with, especially, like I said, in the AFC South, where you'll be playing Houston, Jaguars, Titans. So this makes this mediocre team like way more valuable, because you're going to have opportunities against very bad opponents to play, right? And sneak out a week. But you want to see a bit more consistency, especially with them using that running game and keeping the ball out of Carson Wentz's hands. And then the Dolphins, yeah, like I said, just as long as Tua's not there, we can't touch them. I don't think they're at the point where we just start picking against them, because that defense, like I said, is very good. They got bullied by a Colts team yesterday, sorry. But yeah, you just can't be confident in that offense. So we'll never be picking the Dolphins. We probably won't be picking against them. They're just kind of in that nexus of let's get them figured out first. Their injuries and stuff figured out. Okay, so another game, Browns versus Vikings. Here we are. Okay, so this was like, I kind of pegged this one too. I was like, this is going to be a close game. There's that narrative of the Stefanski Zimmer reunion. But the whole reason this game was close was Baker Mayfield's poor quarterback play. He doesn't add anything. You want to see from your quarterback someone who just keeps defenses honest, who is gonna challenge the corners, get the balls to receivers when you have to. And on a worse team, he would be getting ripped apart by everybody, I think. But on this team, where your roster is incredible and where you're built to run the ball, the mistakes, like, he hardly ever has to be the reason they win, right? So it's good enough for this team. But I think, the side note, this has nothing to do with fantasy. I think the Browns really need to think long and hard internally if Baker Mayfield is the answer. And if he was on his rookie contract for 4 more years, sure, but he's not. You're going to have to give him a second contract. What does he want? You got to figure that out financially. And then you don't want to handcuff yourself with, like, and I'm not talking like an astronomical deal. I don't even think he's probably worth like anything at the bottom tier of that. Like, you just got to think that there are probably other quarterbacks that could run this offense and do more than Baker Mayfield's doing right now. And I don't, like, this isn't Baker Mayfield slander. I'm just talking about what I saw. He was missing Odell Beckham. And I know there's just like some bad juju around whatever their chemistry is, because we've just never seen it connect. But like, it's every game he's been such a non-factor for this team that I think if Browns fans ask themselves, like, would we rather have Baker Mayfield do this in this offense, or like Sam Darnold do this in this offense, or even like they had Tyrod Taylor before Baker and stuff. Baker Mayfield like played better those other years, but this year he's not playing that good. So he's got to figure it out if he wants to take this to the next level, because I want the Browns. If he can take it to the next level, that's so much better, because then I'll be so confident with the Browns any week that I want to take them in Survivor. But right now, they're letting teams like the Vikings hang in there and play these really tight games with them. They should just be blowing the Vikings out. And your defense is incredible, causing so much pressure on Cousins and stuff like that. I'll talk about Cousins in a second, but they're so close to being a team that I'm super comfortable with, but they just Baker needs to just figure it out, or Stefanski needs to find a way to help Baker be better. So maybe it's not Baker's fault, maybe it's Stefanski's fault, I don't know. But yeah, super close. The Browns are super close to being a team I'm really comfortable with. But yeah, the next team in that game is the Vikings, and we're seeing them on like the other side just be sporadically productive with Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Kirk Cousins. Cook's he doesn't look fully healthy yet. I think he still needs like another game to get back where he needs to. But they're going to be a team that makes it difficult. It makes it difficult to pick them or to pick against them, because they seem to be playing down to and up to their opponents, and they've been in close games consistently. So I'm going to be weary of ever going against the Vikings. It's going to be something to keep in mind, right? They should have a win against the Cardinals. But the kicker, right? It just seems like a little bit of a cursed year for them. But yeah, I mean, their secondary needs to kind of get figured out too. Like Patrick Peterson was not an answer for them. I don't know why they ever thought he would be, but yeah. So the Vikings, we'll keep an eye on the Vikings, but they're kind of one of those teams I sneaky don't ever want to pick against because all it takes is Cousins to get right back on his trajectory that he was on the first three games and on this game and actually just hit some of those passes downfield instead of right into Greedy Williams' hands, and they're probably beating the Browns. Yeah, so next game, Giants versus Saints. This was another game I said to stay away from, guys. I thought that the Giants, people were talking about how the Giants receivers were out, so it's like, okay, this is such much a safer play, right? We can take the Saints. It's like, no, because I don't think Jameis Winston is the problem. I don't think Sean Payton's the problem. I think Sean Payton trying to coach Jameis Winston is the problem. Because Sean Payton looks like a little too conservative. Whereas if you have Jameis Winston, you have to be... The only reason to have Jameis Winston as your starting quarterback instead of Taysom Hill is because you're going to use him for his like downfield arm. If you're just going to dink and dunk like they did for this whole game, just keep Taysom Hill in there because it adds a whole other level to your offense, and he can just keep it himself and run and probably do better chunk plays. But if you're never going to throw it downfield with that's what Jameis Winston can do, then like why? You're doing yourself a disservice, and then you get into this game where you're not taking advantage of it. Jameis Winston dinks and dunks at such a mediocre probability or success probability anyways, that it's just like your quarterback is such a non-factor, and in the NFL right now your quarterback needs to be a positive for your team. And it's kind of like what I was talking about with Baker, where if he's not adding anything, then he's a liability, because when it comes to crunch time and you guys actually have to do something and he can't do something, like that's the worst time, right, to have a quarterback that does nothing. But yeah, so that's why I said on the other side of this, you have Daniel Jones, who is receiver proof at the moment because he's producing and getting all these stats and he's completing passes and he's running and the team's losing, but he's keeping them in it. And that's why when people were talking about, that's how I started this, when people were talking about how they're missing two of their top receivers, I'm like, well, they weren't doing much anyways. Like Daniel Jones was spreading it around, doing all the offense himself. So I wasn't scared of those receivers being out because I knew that Daniel Jones was just going to come in here and still do what Daniel Jones does, which was just put up numbers. And he did that. And it took Saquon coming back to the old Saquon that we knew, especially in overtime with his goal line touchdown, where he was like actually cutting and committing to those, that I was just like, oh, I'm so much more comfortable with this offense. It doesn't look like he's hemming and hawing and like tiptoeing around guys. When you see Saquon, when you see Kenny Galladay, you want to see contested catches. When you see Saquon, you want to see him like actually cut and run and use that power that we know he has. But before that, they weren't doing that. They were off with Daniel Jones, and yeah, so good to see that now. So Giants stock is going up. Normally, I still wouldn't even care, but because they're in a division with like Washington and the Eagles, I think there is going to be some opportunities for us to play the Giants. We'll have to figure out when those chances are, what other teams are playing those weeks, but definitely something to keep in mind. Definitely a good sight to see some teams emerging that are playable, especially in their divisions where, you know, a little less competitive, and we know that they kind of got a leg up on them. Or at least I feel that they have a leg up on them. I can understand why nobody else trusts the Giants. That's totally cool. But the Saints, yeah, I can't be confident taking the Saints in anything now because I just don't trust Sean Payton to do what Jameis Winston is capable of doing. You saw it in week 1. He's able to just sling it. And Sean Payton just has to learn to live with the fact that he might throw 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. But you then have to mediate with like as you go. Your game can't bleed to protect yourself from Jameis. It has to be to unleash Jameis. That's why he was able to throw for 5,000 yards and a 30 for 30 line with Bruce Arians, because Bruce Arians did that with his quarterbacks everywhere he's been. This is a bit of a tangent, but he's done that with everywhere he's been, but it was productive. And I trust Sean Payton to be like, okay, well, we can do this for 2 quarters, this dinking and dunking, But come the second half where we kind of need to just put a team away. 11 points isn't putting a team away. The Giants came back from 11 points. This is the NFL. Teams are good. You need to, when you put your foot on a team's throat, and this goes for Baker too, you need to be able to just put your heel down right through and finish it. Because this isn't good enough. And that's why I'm so concerned about teams like the Saints and the Browns, right? Where roster-wise, great, but just quarterback-wise and play-calling-wise, it just doesn't give me any confidence. So a little bit of a tangent there, but just so that you guys have an insight into what my thinking is, how we move forward, right? So we'll move on. Washington versus Falcons. This is just a situation of two bad teams. So how much do we really take away from this? I don't know. I'm probably on both sides of the ball. I'm just going to be looking at team who's playing the Falcons every week, who's playing Washington. Next week it's the Falcons and Jets, so woof, don't touch that at all with anything. Washington, a bit more of a proper football team in terms of like an identity, but Taylor Heineke isn't the answer. I mentioned this in a video a few weeks back where I was like, okay, he had like this really nice moment with the playoffs and stuff like that, but that's one game is not better than like, and I'm a big like criticizer of Cam Newton. I think you gotta just bring in Cam Newton. He even if he's like a backup NFL quality, he just provides you more stability at the quarterback position than what Taylor Heineke does, because we're seeing a little bit more we're seeing a more human quarterback than we did just an inspired like ethereal figure who was just like promoted to a roster and like didn't even want to play football and is now like almost beating Tom Brady in the playoffs. Like that story was great. That moment was great. But the reality now is I need him to perform 17 games of the season. And I don't think Cam Newton performs 17 games of his season. I think Cam Newton performs more frequently than Taylor Heineke does, though. And for a team like Washington, where you want to try and contend for a playoff spot, where your goal was to contend for a playoff spot, if not your division title, how do you can't be complacent and think this is okay. That's been my position. And when your defense is as bad as it is right now, where your defensive line is so talented, but you're not even getting the pressures that you want, and your secondary is so weak that even Matt Ryan with his like weak arm right now is like fluttering balls in and getting and scoring on you. Like this was the best game of Matt Ryan's year so far. He hadn't completed a pass of over 20 yards all season up until this game. That's like super telling, because he wasn't even close to completing those passes, and he did it in this against your defense, a defense that people thought was gonna be good, with his terrible O-line and your very good pass rush. So we talked about the Denver Broncos-Ravens game being a measuring stick. This was an incredible measuring stick of just like ineptitude on both sides of the ball here for the Falcons D, Falcons offense, Washington D, Washington offense. It's a comedy of errors, and just pick teams that are playing against both these teams. I don't mean to be so rude. I love Matt Ryan. I think he's a great quarterback, but geez, like it's not working. I really want the Arthur Smith thing to work. They have Kyle Pitts legitimately playing like 1980s tight end role stuff. Like, no, this guy needs to be playing essentially wide receiver if you're going to get any productivity or value out of this guy. Stop making him do this stuff. It's just mind-boggling. They're rudderless, they're directionless. It's just, yeah, pick against these two teams. I'd never take them to beat teams. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons lose to the Jets. Oh boy, sorry. Texans versus Bills. Again, nothing to take away from this game. Good team versus bad team. It's everything we want to see. Texans are a bad team. Bills are a good team. Josh Allen's starting to play better. He had a couple of INTs dropped. But, I said this with the Tampa Bay game, so I'll say with this game, the weather was a factor for this game, so I won't put too much weight into it. Just a freakish game. But it was nice seeing Josh Allen kind of climb that ladder a bit, get back to where he was supposed to be. And not just be the person he was the first 2 years of his NFL career, which was what he was the first couple weeks. So good to see. The Bills are a bettable team. Awesome moving forward. That's what we want. The Texans, pick teams playing against the Texans. As long as Davis Mills is quarterback, pick teams playing against the Texans. Once Tyrod Taylor comes back, we'll have to start adjusting that. But yeah, Lions versus Bears. I think it's safe to say these are two bad teams now. The Lions just can't close out games, and when they can't close out games, like maybe they get a win at some point in the season, but I'm relatively confident that with competent teams coming in and playing against Detroit, like when the Cardinals had to play Detroit, I think when the Packers had to play Detroit again, I think the Vikings playing Detroit, I might be still comfortable with taking the Vikings. So sorry Lions fans, but I think they should have had a chance at beating the Bears, but they didn't blitz as much as they should have, and that gave Justin Fields a lot of time to. And that's what Justin Fields did at Ohio. He had so much time there to diagnose coverages, wait until his receiver got open and hit them. That's how he got taken in the first round. But on the Bears side, their stock is going up, and I don't think I'd ever be confident in taking them just because Matt Nagy and that coaching staff is a little iffy right now, especially with the Andy Dalton, Nick Foles stuff, where it's just like, okay, well, how many bad games can you have from Justin Fields before you feel obligated to put one of those other guys in, and then you don't know what you're getting? Because the last thing you want is a QB changeup in the middle of a game that you took the Bears. Like, that's just rough. Like, I would never want that. I'd be sweating so much. But there was a super positive in this, which was Nagy handing over the play calling to Bill Lazor, and Bill Lazor did an incredible job of protecting Justin Fields from himself, from any sort of a pass rush, and giving him safe throws, of open throws that Justin Fields was able to be productive with. So that was good to see. Nice to see, but again, we can't bet on the Bears just yet. But the Lions, like I said, we're going to be looking at teams that are playing the Lions every week. Okay, last game I wanted to talk about, Cowboys versus Panthers. This is another one of those really great measuring stick games. This is what I like waiting for because the Panthers were 3-0. How deceptive was that record? You're going against the buzzsaw that was the Dallas Cowboys. And like, boy, it was a good game, and then you just saw the Cowboys pull away. And Darnold played good. Darnold's doing Darnold things. He's back to USC Darnold, where he's confident in making every throw, which is awesome. He's got receivers that can make the catches for every throw, but he is going to miss a few. He did hit, Diggs with just didn't see him. And that was the INT that kind of got the game out of reach for the Panthers, and they're just padding stats the rest of it. But the Cowboys, super confident taking the Cowboys now. I still think their defense is overperforming. I think when they get like a legitimately good team, that defense is going to be a bit of an issue. The Cowboys do have a game later in the year against the Cardinals, so that'll be like a really, really, really good measuring stick for holding out on the Cowboys. But that'll be later on. We might even use them before then, depending on their schedule. But yeah, Cowboys, very good team. We would like to use them. The Panthers still have value. Like, yeah, they lost this game, but I don't think anybody was ever going to be like, oh, Panthers to beat Tampa Bay, Panthers to beat the Packers. It was going to be the Panthers to beat these middle tier teams. So if like the Panthers ever get lined up with, the Panthers are going to get the Falcons. So confident taking the Panthers against the Falcons, right? And that's what you kind of want. You want a team that is going to just dunk on these weak teams, and that's all you can ask for. Their defense is playing good. I think their stats are a little padded a bit just from being as productive they are. The J.C. Horn injury looks like it hurts them. Luckily, Shaq Thompson, everyone got out of that game healthy. There was a bit of an injury scare there with them, but still a good defense, or a performing defense. And as long as Darnold's there, he's getting the rushing touchdowns. He's being productive, so he still keeps their value relatively consistent. I think week in, week out, I am confident taking the Panthers against certain teams. But yeah, that's my quick review of the week 4. There's one game left tonight, but I'll run through that game separately in another video. I thought I wanted to get this video out there to you guys, so you have more time to think about what games you want to take this week coming. Have a good one, guys.